Hello everyone, today we're going to be working on a 2016 Mazda CX-5. Has approximately 115,000 miles on it, so it is about time to change the belts, the water pump, and the thermostat. Uh, the belts and the water pump are located on this side of the engine, and the thermostat is located on the driver's side of the engine here. It is about due to change, and we will also be flushing the coolant system out as well. So this is going to be that video for this. Here are all the tools and parts required, and we'll get right into it. So here, we're taking off the wheel to gain access to the belts and the water pump. So first, you want to loosen your wheel, jack it up, shown here. And then from here, what we can do is take all the lug nuts off and then take the wheel off as well. Once we do that, as you can see here, we will have access to this inside wheel well area. And here, we're actually taking this panel off here, which is held on by 4 tabs. And once we get this off, we're able to get up in there and gain access. So here are the locations, those tabs. There's one right underneath this fender liner, so I'll take that tab off. And here are all of the tabs. As an example, as you can see here, there's a slot here, just wide enough to get a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver in there to pull it off and yank it out. Here we go, it just pulls right out. And these are fragile, so be careful with these. They will break, but they do sell replacements at auto parts that are near you. And once all 4 of those tabs are out, as you can see, it just drops down. And what you can do is actually just pull this out, drops, and just bring it on out. As you can see here, there's access to all of the belts and water pump now. So on the right side here, we have the AC and the alternator belt. Going to the left side here is the water pump and the water pump belt. So with this, what we're going to be starting off with first is taking off the alternator and AC belt. There's a tensioner here, as you can see, that I'm pointing to. With that, what you can do is actually take a 17mm wrench here. There is a cast hexagon bolt looking thing that you can get this wrench on. What you can do is just put the wrench on there, and it is hydraulic, so it does take a little bit to kind of loosen the tension on. It doesn't come off all at once, so it slowly releases the hydraulic pressure in there to loosen the tension. As you can see here, I have the 17mm wrench on there, and as I pull down slowly, you can see here the belt slowly loosens. As you can see, it gets a little slack there. Do it again here, slowly. So if you turn it slowly counterclockwise, it'll come off just like this. You're able to pull the belt off just like that. And turning the belt inside out here, you can see it's starting to form cracks. It's not too bad, but there are cracks, so better to be safe than sorry and change the belt while it's still in decent shape. Next, we're going to be focusing in on the water pump belt, as you can see here. So for the water pump belt to come off, there's no tensioner on there, actually just the tension on the belt by itself. So what we're going to do is take this rag here, pull it around the belt, and essentially rotate the crank to bring the pulley off. It forces the belt off and just comes right off. So what we're going to do here first, as you can see, is a short distance, so it doesn't take that much to take off. So we're going to wrap this rag around the belt here. Doing this one-handed is a little tricky, as you can see with the camera work kind of going around. But once we get it on there, what you're going to do is pull on the rag as you turn the crank is a 21 millimeter, so just get a 21 millimeter socket. I use a 1/2 inch drive here. So as you rotate it, pull the rag towards you and it will pop right off. As you can see here, the belt is just about ready to come off. I stopped the video and grabbed the camera just to show you guys. As you can see here, it's pretty much off, so all what's left to do is turn this crank a little bit more and it'll pop right off. And as you can see here are the belts. The left side is the water pump belt. It's a little bit smaller, not as thick. There's not a lot of cracks in there, if at all. But if you're going to be changing the Serpentine belt for the alternator AC, it's good to just change both of them. Now, with the belts off, you're able to gain access to this tensioner here, which is good to change once you hit the time to change the belt as well. So this is actually held on by a bolt here, the 12 millimeter bolt down in the bottom. And then up at the top, there's also a 12 millimeter nut that's holding it at the top. So taking this bolt off here with a 12 millimeter wrench, and not a lot of force on there to take off, so it's pretty easy to loosen. And up here, as you can see, is the location where the 12 millimeter nut is on for the tensioner. Excuse the light work here, it's kind of tough trying to show you guys. So as you can see here, that's the tensioner, and actually the tensioner, it's been leaking the hydraulic fluid a lot, so I figured it was time to change that out. As you can see here, that's a 12 millimeter nut. So just reach in there with a 12 millimeter wrench and loosen it, and it should just come right out. So here we go. Now we got the nut off, it just slides right out just like that. Pull out from the top, just come straight out. Pretty easy. As you can see here, that's all of the fluid that leaked out. Comparison, the left side is the new tensioner, new bolt, new nut. Right side is the old tensioner with the old bolt, old nut. As you can see here, it's pretty clean. Right side is pretty dirty with the fluid leaked out. Couple of differences. You see the bolt here, it's got the Torx to probably replace that, but there's really no need to replace it if you're going to replace the tensioner. It's better to just change everything out for the price. It's not too expensive. Let's put the tensioner back on. So just slide right back in, starting from the top, get that 12 millimeter nut, put the bolts in there, good to go. So once the tensioner's in, we're going to be replacing the water pump. So in order to do that first, we're going to be draining the coolant system. So go underneath the car here. What you see here is a little access panel that you can take off. It's a 8 millimeter bolt, but you can also use the Phillips. It's just plastic, so there's not a lot to be taken off. Just one bolt holding this panel on. Once you take that off, this access panel will just slide right out. As you can see here, I'm showing the bolt. So once you get this bolt out, just slide this panel right off, just like this. Now you have access to the radiator drain with that butterfly petcock. So all you have to do is just turn that counterclockwise. Once you do, the fluids will start coming out from that little drain hole there. As you can see, I'm just pointing to right there. You want to be careful. Do this when it's cold. If it's hot fluid, you're gonna end up getting too hot. As you can see with the drain pan here, it's kind of two pieces, just to be able to catch everything without everything spilling everywhere. So it just catches and not going all over your garage floor. Here, taking off or unscrewing the butterfly petcock. Also, just make sure everything is clear. Taking it off here. And you will get some on you, so be careful. go. Now we have some fluid coming out now. As you can see, it's a nice clear stream. It's coming on out. And as you can tell, it will start to slow down. So what you have to do is take off the cap of the radiator. And once you do that, it'll open up the system and get the coolant flowing out a lot more. So here we go. Just make sure that it is cool to the touch before you take it off. Unscrew the cap, and there you go. Now it's an open system. Now the fluid is coming out. So we'll let this drain here for a while. Once it's drained out, we'll get into the water pump. The coolant's been drained out from the radiator. Now it's time to move on to the water pump. As you can see here, the water pump, it's got the pulley going down below. As you can see, it's right there. And what we'll have to do is actually take the pulley off first to be able to take the water pump off. So it's held on by 3 bolts here. And what you do to be able to take the pulley off, what you need to do is lock the pulley in place and put in a bolt. I didn't have a bolt that would fit that, so what I actually did is got a 1/4 inch socket extension, just like this one here, to be able to line it up. And there are holes in the pulley that you can slide this through to get into this hole that's inside the water pump. So what this does is it locks it in, and you're able to take off the pulley that's held on by 3 bolts. Just slide it in like that. It is a little tricky, so you will have to kind of figure out a way to line it up. What I did was use my finger, put it through the hole of the water pump pulley, and find that hole in the water pump and slide the extension in there. So once you get the extension in there, the pulley is held in place. Now you can take off the bolts of the pulley, which will gain access to those 3 bolts to pull the water pump off. As you can see here, the pulley bolts have been taken off. So right now what you have to do is take out that bolt or 1/4 inch extension. Just put it off to the side. What you can do is go back down below and take the pulley off, which is what I'm doing right here. Just slides right on out just like that. So you can see those holes are there, so you can put in the 1/4 inch extension. Once that pulley is off, you'll now have access to those 3 bolts to be able to take off. So it's just held on by those 3 bolts on the side, nothing else. That's easy to take off. As you can see here, there's wires to the left that's held on to the water pump. So you have to take that off, but also just to get the water pump off, it is easier to take off the sensors below the water pump. So once you start taking the bolts out, you will start having the coolant come out from the water pump. So just make sure you have a drain pan readily nearby. That way you can catch all of the coolant that comes out. It's important to note that it is toxic, so please be aware of that and make sure that your dogs or cats or any pet doesn't lick it up. It is kind of sweet, so they will come and lick it. So just make sure that you clean it up and catch all of the coolant that you can. So we'll let this drain for a little bit. Once it's all drained out, then we can pull the water pump off. Alright, here we go. The water pump is off now. As you can see, it's not much to it. There is a metal pipe that goes in there with the O-ring on the metal pipe actually. As you can see here, there's that pipe at the top of the screen. there's that rubber O-ring around it, just to ensure a tight seal and no water or coolant goes past that. Actually, what you have to do is take, as I noted earlier, with the sensor for the oil to come off, it's easier access. You're able to move things around, and also the sensor down here, there's a connection that you can take off as well. Once you do that, you'll have access to the water pump pretty easily. And what you do to take the water pump off is actually twist and pull rather than just pulling. So pulling and twisting. You have to twist it just to work around that O-ring on that metal pipe, or else it's really tight on there. You're not going to be able to pull it off. And I had a hell of a time trying to do that. So as you can see here, with the metal pipe there too, there's also a 10mm bolt. It's called a stay bolt that holds the pipe on there. To make things easier, just take off that 10mm bolt and that pipe will come loose, and twist and pull the water pump, and it should just slide right out with that twisting motion. Don't just pull, but you will have to twist. So the new water pump does come with a gasket. You don't have to purchase that separately. And I also purchased this O-ring for that metal pipe. Figured it's good to change any rubber piece once you take something off to put back on, just to ensure a good seal. So once the water pump is back on, when you put it back on, actually you can just slide that in to that metal pipe, and then also put those 3 bolts in there. So same thing as before. What you do is just put the pulley on, make sure that you put that 1/4-inch extension in there to hold the pulley in place, and then install those 3 belts or 3 bolts onto the pulley into the water pump. So once the pulley is on the water pump, you can go back into installing your belts. As you can see here, I'm going to start with the water pump belt. So what you do is actually put it around the crank pulley first, make sure that's lined up, and what you do afterwards is partially put the belt on from below of the water pump pulley, and with a kind of holding the belt in place, you will turn the crank with that 21mm socket and kind of twist that belt into place onto the water pump pulley. As you can see here, it just pops into place with this turning action. That's it. That's the only tension required for the water pump. So once it's on, just double check, make sure everything is on there within the grooves, nothing is slipped off. Feeling around, feels good. So once you get that on, now we can move on to the Serpentine belt for the alternator and the AC compressor. So with that, we can pass the belt through from the top. It's coming in. Anything you want to do up here is make sure that the belt is around the alternator from up here. It's easy to access and see. So once the belt is on from up here, just go back down. Set up the camera here. Make sure you guys can see everything. So once you do that, you can put the belt around the crank pulley and around the AC compressor. Just make sure everything is lined up, and make sure the belt kind of goes under that tensioner pulley as well. So once you do that, you're pretty much set up with the belt. What you do now is get the tension loose from the tensioner. What I did here is actually use 2 wrenches to make things easier to loosen that tension. So as before, this is a hydraulic tensioner, so you'll have to slowly decompress that tensioner to release the tension of the belt to put it on. So this is going to be quite fun with one hand. So I'll put the camera down, that way you guys can see how slow you can work with the tensioner to loosen that tension. As you can see here, I'm starting to pull down. So So you're going to go counterclockwise to release that tension. Slowly but surely, that tension will come loose. You're able to slide the belt on. Little by little here. Once you think you have enough tension, go ahead and start sliding the belt on. Right here. It doesn't take a lot of force. Just make sure that you hold the wrench. Just like this, and you're able to get it on. Once you think it's on, slowly release the wrenches to release the tension on the belt. Just like that. So once you're good, just double check the belts again. Make sure that they're in the grooves of the pulleys, that they don't tear anything up. And that's it for the belts. Let's go back up on top. Just make sure that the alternator is good with the belt. Everything looks good here. Good to go. So now that the belt and water pump is on, now we're going to focus our attention on the thermostat here. What we're going to do is take the battery off first. Once the battery is out, then we can focus in on the intake side with the fresh air duct here, and then the PCM that's right there. Once all that's out, then you'll have access to the thermostat. It's kind of hard to see here, but you will need to take all this off for easy access. So now, as you can see here, we're taking the battery off here. Negative side first, always. Don't take the positive off first. So once we get those off from the battery, make sure that you take the battery strap off as well to be able to pull the battery out. Once you get that off, just pull it out. Good to go. Once the battery comes out, now you can focus your attention onto the air cleaner side. First, you'll have to take the cover off, and then you can get to the fresh air duct. So let's take the cover off here. The cover is just held on by two clips in the front, and also the collar there for the duct. You can see here are the clips. One clip, just pull. Another clip there, just pull that down. Now the cover is loose, so what you can do now is just pull it towards you and up. There's 3 tabs back there that you need to be careful for to pull the cover forward towards you, and it should just slide right out. Just like that, you can pull up. Once that's free, now what you can do is take off the sensor connection, the MAF sensor, which is right there. So make sure that comes off. You don't need a needle nose, you can just do it by your hands. Just push down on the clip and pull out, and it'll pop right off just like that. There's also a clip holding that wire to the air cleaner cover, so just make sure that you pop that off as well, because you will need to take the cover off entirely. Alright, once that's off, just pull it off to the side. Now you can take the sleeve off, loosen the 10mm bolt there. That way you can just slide the cover right off. Alright, once it's loose, just pull the cover right off. Just slides right off. Just like that. Now set that aside. Just come back. Now you can take the air cleaner out. Full access. So just pull that off. Now once you pull that off, you have access to be able to pull the fresh air duct and then the box off as well. As you can see here, you got to take these two 10mm bolts out, and then the 3 grommets here holding the box on. Just pull those up and everything will come out as one piece. Alright, so once that's off, now just pulling up the box, we'll demonstrate here. What you have to do is just pull up at those 3 rubber grommet locations, and it just slides right up. Just like that. Now it comes out in one piece. There you have it. Now the air cleaner system is out. Now what you do, all that's really left now is to take off the PCM. So it's just held on by those 2 10mm bolts with that cover. Once you take that off, you'll have access to the connectors and all of the bolts holding the tray in. So it's the same tray that holds the battery in as well. Just pop everything off, then you'll have full access to the thermostat. So there's connections here, bolts here, pull right out. Okay, now that we have that cover off, now we can take these PCM connectors off. It's just plastic tabs, just push down and over. And that loosens the connection for these connectors. This one, there's a tab right there, as you can see, a black tab. Push that in, pull up. Now the connector is loose. So once it's loose, all you have to do is just pull those up, and they are disconnected from the PCM. So with it disconnected now we can take off these 2 10mm nuts. Once we get these nuts off, now we can take the PCM out. Just slides right out. And once that PCM is out, now we have access to the entire tray to get the bolts off here. As you can see, there's 5 bolts in the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the back, there's 3 12mm bolts holding it in place. 1, 2, and 3. That's all that's holding the tray in. Once you get those out, it pops out. Then you'll have this nut as well to take off for the wire connection. Once that's off, then you have full access to the thermostat. Alright, now that the tray is off here, as you can see, complete access to this side of the engine now. It opens up quite a bit. So coming down here, this is where the thermostat is. You see the black housing there with the 3 bolts. I'm going to bring a light down here. Now you can clearly see, not the silver thing, down here. This here is held on by 3 8mm bolts. Once you take those out, it just pops right off. And you'll have access to the thermostat. Also, make sure to keep some rags around, just making sure there's no leakage, and around that electrical connection as well. Okay, now we've taken off the last bolt from the thermostat housing. You see here, it just pulls right off. Now you have complete access to the thermostat that you can just take off. As you can see here, there is a jiggle pin up at the top, so making sure that goes back in that same alignment. From here, we just need to pull the thermostat out. And I've tried different methods, screwdriver and pulling it out by hand, but what I found out what worked best was just getting some pliers and pulling it out with brute force. Just comes right out, just like that. As you can see here, it's the old thermostat, the jiggle pin there, just making sure that lines up with the notch. As you can see, there is no sealant or gasket that's left on the thermostat housing or on the block. The thermostat itself has a rubber gasket around it. As you can see here, just a rubber gasket just around the thermostat. So no additional sealant or gasket is required. The new thermostat as well comes with the gasket already attached. So just like this. New rubber gasket all around, and jiggle pin right there. So once you go back to put it in, make sure that notch lines up. Put that in there. So once that's in, all you have to do is just put the black housing back on and those 3 8mm bolts, and it's an easy connection from there. Alright, now we got the thermostat in. Now to put the battery tray and everything else back together in order. Now that the PCM of the tray is back in, now we want to focus in on the air cleaner. Set off the MAF sensor to the side. You don't want that get trapped underneath the box. So with this, just slide it back in from the top, just like you pulled it out. line up those 3 rubber grommets. All you have to do is just push down at these 3 locations to snap it in. One, 2, and then 3 down there. Just push and snap. Once it's snapped in, now you can put on those 2 10mm bolts to hold the fresh air duct in place. Alright, once that's in there, now we can just put the air cleaner back in there, along with the cover, slide it back in, connect the map sensors, and that's it for the air cleaner. Alright, now the air cleaner is back in. Now to put in the PCM. So with the PCM here, as you can see at the bottom, there's just a tab to align it, to slide it in. And there's 2 holes for the nut to tighten down into. So let's go ahead and put this in. Alright, now that the nuts are tightened, what we'll want to do here now is put those connectors back to the PCM. So you want to make sure that they connect flatly and securely. So just put it back in. And make sure that these slide in. What you want to do is just make sure those snaps are just back. Once it's in, what you do is bring those connectors down. And you'll hear a click, just like that. And once it's clicked, that means it's good to go. So with that in, now all we have to do is put the battery in, and that'll be done. Alright, now that we have all of that in, now we're going to move into putting in some distilled water to the coolant to flush the system out. So what you see here is actually the funnel. It's a different kind of funnel. You're actually able to keep this funnel on and pour more fluid, a little bit more fluid than you need, just to get the system running, so you don't have to put the radiator cap on to run the system and bleed it or flush it. So just put it in all of the distilled water just to do the first flush, and put in as much as I can. Once that's good, start the engine and you'll start seeing bubbles come up as the thermostat opens up. So we have the engine running. So what we want to do here is make sure the thermostat opens up, but most importantly, you just want to make sure that the engine does not overheat. So just keeping an eye on it as it runs. Now I've flushed the system twice. Everything is looking good. No leaking here. Thermostat opened up. Got the heater core good as well. And that's pretty much it for this job. So with this, we've replaced the belts, replaced the water pump, the thermostat. Here's the old coolant. As you can see, please return that or turn it into your local auto parts store. They should take it. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching.